Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's Teresa Fresco here from Fraser Basin Council, and I wanted to welcome you to our session entitled Transboundary Efforts to Inspire Salmon-Safe Friendly Urban Development and Agriculture Practices in the Pacific Northwest. I'm really pleased that you could all join us this afternoon. I'll be your co-host, and my role will be to timekeep and moderate the Q&A portion of our session alongside my colleague Dan Kent from Salmon-Safe Inc. in the United States, who will be moderating our speaker presentations. But before I pass it on to Dan, I did want to acknowledge respectfully that Kelsey, Wendy, and myself are joining you from Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, who have been stewards of these lands and waters since time immemorial. And I also wanted to respectfully acknowledge that Dan and David are joining us from the traditional territories of the Multnomah and Muckleshoot peoples down south in the States. And with that, I will pass the baton to Dan to get us started.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm not sure where my video is.
We can see you.
Oh, you can see me, great. Yeah, thanks again, Teresa, the inspiration behind this session and one of the program organizers of the conference. Welcome to a Salmon-Safe Salish Sea. We know that non-point source pollution, largely contaminated runoff from farms and cities, is one of the key environmental impacts on the Salish Sea. Our session today will explore Salmon-Safe's collaborative efforts to incentivize water quality and habitat protection on both sides of the border. With respect to our presenters, I'll lead us off from the very southern reaches of the Salish Sea here in the city of Roses, Portland, Oregon, talking about Salmon-Safe and our urban work in Seattle and mid-Puget Sound. I'll be followed by David Berger with Stewardship Partners. And then Teresa will join us again along with her colleague Kelsey Taylor with Fraser Basin Council. And we'll wrap up with Wendy Avis with Vancouver International Airport presenting a case study of Salmon-Safe certification. Again, I'm Dan Kent, co-founder and executive director of Salmon-Safe. Kicking off with clean water for salmon. I'm a native of a small farm in the Palouse Hills of Eastern Washington, and I've been committed to environmental nonprofit work for 25 years after a rather brief career in marketing and advertising in the financial services industry. My task today is mostly to provide context for our panelists. So I'll be offering background about Salmon-Safe, some of our partnerships and that strategy for expansion across salmon watersheds. I'll introduce some of our urban work in the South Salish Sea, mid-Puget Sound in Seattle area, and then I'll share some public outreach campaigns. A little bit about Salmon-Safe. Salmon-Safe is different than many environmental certification programs or green rating systems in the built environment, in that Salmon-Safe comes from the environmental community. We were founded by a river and native fish protection organization called Pacific Rivers here in Oregon 20 years ago. We're now an independent, Portland-based nonprofit organization. We spun off from Pacific Rivers in 2002 or so, and Salmon-Safe over the years has become a leading West Coast eco-label, expanding up and down the West Coast through a network of partnerships. Implementation partners in key salmon watersheds like the Fraser Basin of British Columbia with Fraser Basin Council in the upper edge of the map there. Stewardship partners in Washington State. And then also through a network of certification partners, particularly on the agricultural landscape where Salmon-Safe is overlaid oftentimes with the wine industry's certification initiative or organic certification under the National Organic Program, or even Global Gap, which is an international food safety certification. So Salmon-Safe works across the region we call Salmon Nation, on the southern end, Northern California, up through Western Oregon, interior Columbia Basin, of course, a major focus in Puget Sound and British Columbia, and just now some emerging partnerships in Alaska. And we're exploring now opportunities to work in both the built environment and with agriculture in Alaska. Across all of these regions, Salmon-Safe's goal is really its certification to inspire restoration. We offer programs across land management activities, ranging from large-scale urban development to the way corporate and university campuses are developed and operated, cities and municipal operations, including park systems, have been a major focus for Salmon-Safe. Airports, light industrial lands, transportation infrastructure, and then of course agriculture, which is really Salmon-Safe's founding core program, going all the way back to the beginnings of Salmon-Safe in Oregon's Willamette Valley, working primarily with wine growers. And you'll hear more about all of these activities from our panelists. Salmon-Safe offers peer-reviewed standards for site certification like farms and park systems and urban development, as well as accreditation standards. Salmon-Safe accreditation applies to firms that commit to Salmon-Safe principles across their operations, even at projects that may not be certifiable. Salmon-Safe accredited contractors, for example, would commit to zero sediment runoff across all of their operations in large-scale construction. In the 2 decades that Salmon-Safe has been doing this work, we've seen huge strides forward in green building and sustainable agriculture, though not as much with respect to site ecology. And that's really been Salmon-Safe's primary focus in our niche, whether the site is an international airport or a biodynamic vineyard. The Salmon-Safe assessment process, again, based on peer-reviewed standards, it's really the same process regardless of type of operation we're certifying. It's system-wide evaluation of watershed impacts. And really what Salmon-Safe translates to, yes, the focus is salmon, but really our interest is healthy watersheds. And a Salmon-Safe site ideally is having a positive impact with respect SAP analysis, environmental policy review. There's an on-site assessment by an independent science team. Many of our science teams in working on the urban landscape have been led by Dr. Rich Horner, stormwater scientist and professor emeritus at University of Washington. There's a report of team findings that includes recommendations and also conditions for certification, the things that must happen in order for a site to fully meet Salmon-Safe standards. And then certification is formalized upon the site or landowner's commitment to meeting those conditions. And then, of course, there's annual review of the site's performance in terms of meeting Salmon-Safe standards, and we're checking in on anything that has changed at that site. The place where Salmon-Safe focused on testing and refining and really scaling up our urban certification tools has been the mid-Puget Sound region, starting with sites in Seattle, like this one, Olympic Sculpture Park. This is work that, again, is fundamentally about reducing contaminated runoff that is the biggest source of pollution in Puget Sound. We do this work by inspiring developers to transition to Salmon-Safe design, construction, and operation at the site scale, or even the district scale, to practices that protect Puget Sound. For Salmon-Safe, this work has largely been catalyzed by the commitment of the late Paul Allen's development firm Vulcan to become the nation's first Salmon-Safe developer, particularly in the last 5 years as it leads the redevelopment of the South Lake Union district in Seattle and a number of high-profile Salmon-Safe projects. Here's an example of a Salmon-Safe science team in the field. This is early on in the work with Vulcan. The team is reviewing pollution prevention practices at a site that's just beginning groundwork in downtown Seattle. So I wanted to highlight some projects, just run quickly through a number of them just to kind of give you a sense of the scale that Salmon-Safe is working across the region. This is a project, a Vulcan project, Vulcan constructed project, Salmon-Safe certified Facebook campus, notable in part for the first US use of a pedestrian and habitat-friendly feature called a woonerf, or a through passage. And you can see it there in the center between the two buildings where stormwater management and habitat features are predominant. The project also features extensive green roofs and bioretention planters. Also wanted to show how Vulcan is communicating their Salmon-Safe certification in the city. This is construction site fencing in Seattle's International District, large-scale project that includes affordable housing. This project is a 6-building transit-oriented development project on Seattle's Capitol Hill with a developer called Gertie Needland on land owned by Sound Transit. And this project is built above a light rail station and tunnel and includes significant affordable housing, which is a major focus for Salmon-Safe in our urban work. Wanted to show this one, REI's new headquarters, not yet occupied, under construction in Bellevue's Spring District. Prior to development, this area, the Spring District, was an industrial site, 89% impervious with runoff flowing untreated into Lake Washington. In contrast, this Salmon-Safe site will manage its stormwater while also providing lots of ecological function in the city of Bellevue. Salmon-Safe often works at a district scale with an initial focus on stormwater infrastructure and then moving forward, looking at design of individual buildings or different phases of the project, then honing in on construction management practices and pollution prevention and construction management, and then finally planning for the operations of the site, low input landscaping, water conservation, and so on. This project in Bellevue, it's midstream now in the Salmon-Safe process. It's one of our biggest projects ever with 17 new buildings. And our focus here again has really been early on site-wide stormwater infrastructure. At other projects, our science team focuses more on habitat and shoreline restoration. This is Expedia's 41-acre headquarters campus on Pier 88 in the Inner Bay neighborhood of Seattle. And again, science team here really focused on shoreline restoration in landscape management across this large campus, given the ecological sensitivity of the site. One common element between all of these sites is a commitment to meeting Salmon-Safe's 10 principles for urban development. I'm not going to go through these individually, but it's really about integration of habitat. It's about thinking about projects in the context of their watershed, and it's about on-site infiltration of stormwater and then maximizing habitat potential for the site. And I would encourage you to visit salmonsafe.org if you're interested in knowing more about the 10 principles. I wanted to give a big shout out to the city of Shoreline. After 18 months of working across the city of Shoreline, and Shoreline is just north of Seattle on Puget Sound. After 18 months of working with our science team, city of Shoreline became, this was actually Earth Day of last year, Shoreline was awarded Salmon-Safe certification for transitioning city operations, city facilities to Salmon-Safe certification. And here you can see Salmon-Safe oftentimes partnering with our certified projects in public awareness, in this case, a bus side campaign with the city of Shoreline. Shoreline, Washington's first Salmon-Safe city. Then I thought I would end by just sharing some of our other public education campaigns. Recently, we've been working with Snohomish County, again, north of Seattle, up in Everett, at a site, Payne Field, Snohomish County Airport. Example of bus sides preferred by frequent flyers, and you see the fish safe for arrivals, and departures. This is a print ad recognizing our pioneering salmon-safe Puget Sound construction companies, and as you can see, focusing in on the water quality impacts on Puget Sound from construction. I wanted to show a series of Portland bus sites recognizing Portland as the first salmon-safe city. I should note also that at that time, Portland's mayor issued a challenge to the cities of Seattle and the city of Vancouver, both, to follow its lead and achieve salmon-safe certification, like City of Shoreline again, and City of Portland. Salmon-safe, this is an example of a campaign around residential district salmon-safe development, South Waterfront in Portland, live, eat, shop, spawn. We're doing a lot of work with higher education, university campuses. This is an example, spawning new ideas, recognizing the certification of Lewis and Clark College right here in Portland. Salmon-Safe, joining with Stewardship Partners, which leads our Salmon-Safe Golf initiative across the region, recognized earlier this year, city of Tumwater, Washington, southern end of Puget Sound, near Olympia, recognizing Tumwater for salmon-safe certification of its golf course. I should note too that the first golf course ever to achieve salmon-safe certification is Salish Cliff, golf course developed by, very environmentally innovative golf course developed by the Squaxin Island tribe, again on the southern end of Puget Sound. Another example, Oregon Convention Center helping Portland's oldest convention continue, the oldest convention, of course, being the salmon migrating up the Willamette River here in Portland. And then finally wanted to share a last example. Thanks to Nike, they'll run a clean race. One of our very early urban projects and ongoing projects has been working with Nike, transitioning its campus to certification, Cedar Mill Creek going through campus, and the wetlands on campus. So thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to introduce David Berger. David, would you like to take over in terms of screen share? It's my pleasure to introduce David. He's been leading the charge for a salmon-safe Salish Sea on the US side of the border for more than 15 years. David joined Stewardship Partners as executive director in 2000 and brings with him more than 25 years of experience. I'm going to stop sharing, maybe that'll help. David brings with him more than 25 years of experience working on community-based salmon recovery and managing nonprofit organizations. David has worked both locally in Puget Sound as executive director for Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group, restoring salmon habitat with landowners, and statewide as program manager for People for Salmon, building capacity of organizations to engage community citizens in salmon recovery. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Coming to you from Seattle, you can see the Space Needle in the background. Puget Sound right behind us. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you all a little bit about salmon-safe farm practices and the work of Stewardship Partners. As a lifelong resident of the region and avid fisher and conservationist, I have personally witnessed that salmon are not safe. The populations, unfortunately, continue to decline, and it's having a huge impact on those who depend on them, especially southern resident orcas. And while we all know there isn't a silver bullet solution to bring them back, Salmon-Safe certification is one of the tools that offers value and really an opportunity for people to get involved. Stewardship Partners is celebrating 20 years of community-based voluntary stewardship. Our mission is to create people-based solutions that engage Puget Sound communities as caretakers of the land and water that sustain us, And caretakers are all of us, all of you, homeowners, shoppers, farmers, moms, sisters, dads, kids. And partners really are the root of our work and how we accomplish our shared goals. These are a handful of the partnership categories that we work with across our programs. So we have three main programs that work towards our mission. The Snoqualmie Stewardship. In the Snoqualmie, we work with dozens of landowners who voluntarily participate with us. And together, to date, we have restored over 18 miles of riparian habitat. One of the projects that we developed within that program is Adopt a Buffer, kind of like Adopt a Highway. It's adopting reaches of the river on farmland. And it's a great engagement portal for businesses, school groups, individuals, really to get their boots on the ground. The Green Infrastructure Program, many of you may have heard of the Green Infrastructure Summit. That will be going virtual as well next week, and you can find out information and a link on our website, stewardshippartners.org. And some of the other projects within Green Infrastructure include sound impacts, the 12,000 Rain Garden campaign, and then our annual gathering called Feast on the Farm, where we get to share stories and bring people out to see the work that's being accomplished by farms. So we work to provide resources, environmental solutions for all kinds of people. And we did a promotional bus side ad, billboards with some of our partners. This is Wendy Monroe from Full Circle Farm. We did it with musicians and chefs, and really trying to get people to see that that everybody's part of the solution. So Salmon-Safe in Puget Sound, when it all started. We started the Snoqualmie WATERSHED, Snoqualmie Stewardship Program in 2001, doing the habitat restoration work, planting trees, removing invasive plants, and really starting to understand farm operations and trying to figure out how farms and salmon recovery work could go hand in hand. And understanding also that some of the best salmon habitat in Puget Sound is located adjacent to these farms. We had probably 5 or 6 farms by 2004 that were participating in the program, and we really wanted to reward those farms for participating in that restoration work. And one of my former colleagues, Larry Nussbaum, had came across the Salmon-Safe program, working with Dan Kent, and working with Salmon-Safe, we certified the first 4 farms in Washington State in 2004. So to give you a little bit deeper dive into what it means, how does a farm get certified? They must really, they got to go through a rigorous third-party assessment. The Salmon-Safe certification, it's specific, site-specific, so it's includes not just the areas that's being farmed, but the areas that are also being unfarmed. It could be the lowland area that's being farmed, the upland, which is forest. And so it takes into account all that stuff in the evaluation process to find out really, are those operations directly or indirectly affecting water quality, as well as fish and wildlife habitat. The objective of the evaluation process is to compare overall farm management and operation to best management practices for protecting watershed health and enhancing wildlife habitat. The certification is intended to acknowledge farms that are going above and beyond the minimum requirements for stream protection. And of course, all the farms must comply with local, state, and federal regulations before Salmon-Safe consideration. So based on the assessment of the whole farm, farm evaluator may make additional conditions or recommendations for achieving the certification. For example, assessor may certify a farm as conditionally certified because of, an example would be like an uncovered manure pile that's really close to a stream that could be leaching into the stream. This doesn't block them from becoming certified, but instead we have a conditions contract with that farmer, making it a requirement that they remedy the problem within a prescribed period of time. And usually in the first year or two. These certifications for farms, I should mention, are for a 3-year period. So while the primary focus of Salmon-Safe certification program is salmon species and their habitat requirements, It's also intended to promote landscape level conservation, watershed-wide conservation and protection of biological diversity, something that Dan had mentioned earlier. The Salmon-Safe Farm certification standards are organized into these 7 categories, so I'll quickly go through these. There's in-stream habitat protection and restoration. We talked a little bit about that, restoration, removing invasive plants. Riparian and wetland area management, so things like buffers along streams and waterways. Irrigation, water use management, so making sure that the pumps that are pumping water out of a stream have screens on them so they don't injure fish, or they're using drip irrigation as opposed to broadcasting water and not being efficient with it. Erosion and sediment control, so working with the farms to make sure that they plant cover crops before the winter floods come, and they don't lose soil and it doesn't then end up affecting spawning salmon. Integrated pest management, IPM, so looking at alternatives to chemical use, planting certain plants so that bugs will eat those plants as opposed to the produce that's being grown. Animal management, so making sure there's proper fencing, that animals are rotating, and that there's fencing along streams, and that they're having less of an impact on the land. And then finally, the biodiversity conservation. So looking at things like bird boxes or setting aside a certain area, habitat area. In the case of a vineyard, they're not going to cut down all of the sagebrush. They'll leave a little bit of that as a habitat area for grouse or whatever type of specific species is in that area. So these standard categories they're broken down to include performance requirements, and those define desired outcomes and restoration efforts that provide specific guidance for reaching certification. So based on a farm's level of performance, the assessor will then recommend full certification or for certifications with conditions that I mentioned earlier. To date, there are over 100 farms and vineyards in Washington State. This is a really cool map that was developed by one of our former employees that is a Google map, and you can just click right on one of those fish and it'll bring up the farm, and it'll go straight to their website, and also give you a list of the products that they have available. So we're still developing a little bit about the list of products and where you can purchase those. You can also find on our website the list of Salmon-Safe wines that are certified, as well as on Salmon-Safe's website. This is just a handful of the Salmon-Safe products that are now available. You'll see in there milk and eggs, produce, cheese, meats, flours, wine, beer, and these are all widely available at farmers markets, co-ops, but also at QFC and Safeway and a lot of those main grocery chains. So these are all accessible, and that's one thing we're trying to do, is make these products more accessible for the public to support these farms. Some of the well-known brands that you may recognize include Wilcox Eggs. Wilcox Farms is located in the Nisqually watershed. That was one of the first farms that we added to the program after our work in the Snoqualmie, and working with the Nisqually partners, the Nisqually tribe and the River Council and others. They really helped us elevate the brand and make those connections to really help jumpstart the program in Washington State and Puget Sound. Another one is Draper Valley Chicken in the lower right here, has the logo on the product. That can be found everywhere. Chateau Ste. Michelle, everybody pretty much knows that winery. They have the 2 largest vineyards certified under the program in Eastern Washington. And this is one of the promotions we did with them to give away tickets to our Feast on the Farm. So, this is all about making sure that we reward the farmers for doing the right thing. And with your help, we can make more positive change. So we're really trying to encourage other partners to get involved with the program. We do a lot of promoting of the brand and certified farms to consumers throughout the Northwest, and encouraging them to use their purchasing power to support local sustainable farms. So through our various social media outlets, Facebook and Instagram, our goal is to direct the traffic straight back to the farmers' websites or to their own social media pages. And we share all kinds of things, success stories, new farms that have been certified, salmon-safe events, wine tastings, other opportunities really to raise the brand, farm awareness, and promote opportunities for everyone to get involved in the program. We also work with specific farms and local publications to create traditional advertisements to raise the brand awareness. You can see some of those examples here. The Ladybug brand through our organically grown company can be found in many markets. You'll see the wine ad here that was in Edible Seattle, and the bus side ad below. We've run a lot of radio ads. We get a lot of pro bono ads when space becomes available in Seattle Times and other publications. So we do as much as we can for these farms to help promote their products. I didn't realize this, but I guess nearly 90% of all the flowers that we purchase are coming from outside the country, a lot of them from South America, and they use quite a bit of chemicals when they're growing these flowers. And we started working with the Seattle Whole Growers Market Cooperative a few years ago to provide consumers with a local source of chemical-free flowers and plants. They grow orchids. There's a network of all these growers throughout throughout Puget Sound and Eastern Washington. And so together we're creating this marketing program for the distribution of the flowers to stores, and we're going to start doing events at their distribution facility, which is in South Seattle, which is open to the public on Saturdays and Sundays. So a couple of years ago, Stewardship Partners developed a partnership with Gelatiamo, a 20-year-old local gelato shop in Seattle. Its owner, Maria, from Italy, came to the States. Really, she understands the value of Salmon-Safe and wanted to use the ingredients in her products. So we worked together and created some Salmon-Safe gelato flavors, cherry and pear and others. And they're utilizing the cream from Fresh Breeze Organic Dairy in Linden, Washington, and then fresh produce, fruit from Tonemaker Farms in Eastern Washington. And this is certainly one of my favorite Salmon-Safe products that we've been involved with to date. So to end my presentation, I want to share this 60-second PSA that we did, I guess like 10 years ago. And you've seen some of the slides have included this big salmon, and this is Sal the salmon. This is our mascot for the Salmon-Safe program. And I just want to say in closing that I'm just really proud of the outcome of this program, and really shout out and thank you to all of the people that have been involved with it. And again, kind of repeating the message that there's plenty of room for more partners, and we really want to see this grow. So we welcome you to become a partner, and thanks for listening.
Let's share the wealth, we're on the rise. If everybody comes together, then we all will share the prize. Oh, share the wealth, show that you care. Our water runs so deep, there's enough for all to share. Let's share the wealth.
Help protect our native salmon. Look for eggs, wine, and produce that bear the Salmon-Safe seal.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Dan.
I'm pleased to next introduce Teresa Fresco and Kelsey Taylor, the Salmon-Safe BC leadership team at Fraser Basin Council. And let me give a brief introduction for both, and then they'll get rolling. Teresa is the regional manager of the Greater Vancouver Sea to Sky region at Fraser Basin Council and the Salmon-Safe BC program manager. She has more than 10 years experience in the areas of collaborative watershed governance, watershed sustainability initiatives, process design and facilitation, and program development and delivery. In addition to her role at Fraser Basin Council, Teresa is a lay member for BC's College of Applied Biology Council. Joining Teresa from Salmon-Safe BC is Kelsey Taylor. Kelsey is the program coordinator for the Greater Vancouver Sea to Sky region at Fraser Basin Council and the Salmon-Safe BC coordinator. Kelsey has several years of experience in community engagement, process design and facilitation, watershed sustainability and management initiatives, as well as community planning, including Indigenous community planning. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Teresa and Kelsey. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Dan. And hello, everybody. So Kelsey and I wanted to provide an overview of the Salmon-Safe BC program, showcase some work that we're currently undertaking, and give you a bit of a glimpse of what's next for our program and some of the key priorities we want to focus on moving forward. I'll provide a start with Salmon-Safe Communities, which is our urban program, and then Kelsey will follow me with an overview of our agriculture certification program, as well as an overview of our upcoming work with First Nations. So as Dan mentioned, Fraser Basin Council is the delivery partner for Salmon-Safe BC. And for those of you that are not familiar with FBC, we are a nonprofit, non-government organization with a mandate to advance sustainability in BC with a focus on the Fraser River Basin. There are 3 strategic priorities that we focus our work on, and those are climate change and air quality, watersheds and water resources, and planning for resilient communities and regions. And you'll see really with the Salmon-Safe BC program, it touches on each of these strategic areas of focus. To give you a bit of history of how the Salmon-Safe program unfolded on this side of the border, Salmon-Safe launched in British Columbia in 2010, starting with the agriculture program, and this program was formerly led by the Pacific Salmon Foundation. Following that, Salmon-Safe Communities, our urban program, was launched in 2013 by Fraser Basin Council. And then quite recently, in late 2018, the agriculture program was transitioned to FBC from Pacific Salmon Foundation, making us the sole delivery organization currently for Salmon-Safe BC. And we really did want to heartfully acknowledge all the great work that PSF has done over the years, and we really hope that we can carry that torch with the agriculture program. One of the key concepts that's at the heart of Salmon-Safe BC and that we like to emphasize when we work with our partners is this concept that everything is connected. And so much like this picture effectively demonstrates, our habitat is really salmon habitat. And that by focusing on salmon, it really helps people connect the dots that what washes off of our sidewalks, our streets, our bridges, our yards eventually ends up in our rivers, lakes, streams, and into the ocean where salmon live and thrive. So when working with our partners, we explore the question of how we can adopt better practices to urban development to make them more holistic and at the site level so that we can have more of a positive impact rather than a negative impact on salmon and other species connected to the watershed system. In terms of standards, there are 5 core standards that guide the certification for urban development and 2 context-specific standards that are triggered whenever a water body runs through the site or is adjacent to the site. So the 5 core standards are stormwater management, water use management, and I should note that that's external water use external to the building, erosion prevention and sediment control. This typically pertains to the construction phase of development, pesticide reduction and water quality protection, and the overall enhancement of urban ecological function. So this is focused on really improving the biodiversity values on site. And then the 2 context-specific standards are the in-stream habitat protection and restoration, riparian wetland vegetation protection and restoration, and those are triggered again when a water body runs through the site. Although Salmon-Safe is its own standalone certification, it does have compatibility with a number of other green certification programs. Of course, the most well-known is LEED, but also others are Envision, Living Building Challenge, Built Green, and Sustainable Sites. The most direct complementarity of the Salmon-Safe program is with the LEED program, whereas Salmon-Safe certified sites can receive an extra credit under LEED in the innovation and design category. And we find that that's quite popular with developers. In terms of scope of assessment and certifications, assessments can be conducted for buildings that are in the design phase, but I did also want to note that assessments can be done for buildings that are already completed. Site inspections are undertaken by an independent BC-based assessment team. That includes experts that span the core standard areas that I mentioned earlier. And also wanted to acknowledge that the standards are peer reviewed by science and the academic community based on the biological needs of salmon. I won't go into the assessment in too much detail because I know Dan has mentioned this in the overview, but there are a couple things I wanted to note. Firstly, compared to the agriculture certification, which is 3 years, the urban certification cycle is actually 5 years. And we do perform an annual review each year to follow up on any conditions or recommendations for improvement on the site. And I feel like the photos on the left sum it up quite nicely in terms of the assessment to certification process. These photos depict our work on the Mountain Equipment Co-op flagship store in Vancouver. That's us deployed during the construction phase for an on-site assessment. And then at the completion, we had an event signaling the certification as well as the opening of the store, and that's CEO Phil Arata that we're handing the certification to. We have 3 urban sites that are certified in the Lower Mainland, and we do have 6 in progress. The first site that was certified in BC, urban site, was Mountain Equipment Co-op's head office. That was certified in 2015. Our second site was the YVR Airport, which became the first Salmon-Safe certified airport in the world in 2016. And I always like to tease our US counterparts that YVR did beat SeaTac by a hair, by a few hours. And I'm quite excited that Wendy will be presenting YVR's great work shortly. And then our third site is Mountain Equipment Co-op's flagship store, which we certified this year, and that is also in Vancouver. I do acknowledge that this map is very focused on the Lower Mainland, and that is really reflective of where we've seen the greatest amount of interest and momentum to date. But I did want to acknowledge that the program is province-wide, and we do have every intent to continue expanding our reach outside into other communities in BC. So to give you a sense and a flavor of what Salmon-Safe sites in BC look like, I did want to share a couple of examples. The first here is the MEC head office site. As mentioned, it was the first urban site that we certified in BC. This is actually a former brownfield site located on the False Creek Flats in Vancouver. The area was previously used for industrial purposes, and so when MEC was excavating, they wanted to ensure that they improved the environmental quality of the site, and they did so through remediation. Stormwater on site is very interesting in how it's captured, stored, and managed. It's captured from a green/blue roof on top of the building, and also there are a biofiltration garden and rain gardens located at the back near the parking lot and on the sides, as you can see in the picture. In terms of the capture of rainwater, there is an underground cistern at 7,700 gallons, which is located in the underground parking lot. Which is then used, the rainwater captured is then used for toilet flushing and irrigation for the gardens. And this has helped reduce the building's potable water use by 55%. Stormwater that runs off of the parking lot, I mentioned, is captured and treated in a biofiltration garden. And then we have the small rain gardens on the side to capture the runoff from the sidewalks. All of the plants in the gardens are drought tolerant, native species, and MEC doesn't use any pesticides or synthetic fertilizers in their landscaping. And I also wanted to mention that the building is mass timber construction. Another really interesting site, this one is still in progress, being designed by Dialogue Design on Keith Drive. This is also located in the False Creek Flats in Vancouver, just a few parcels away from the MEC head office. And I wanted to mention one of the key challenges facing this site is that it is adjacent to Clark Drive, and you'll see Clark Drive, it's the large road depicted in the bottom photo. And Clark Drive has been ranked as the 7th most polluted street and outflow in the city of Vancouver. And Dialogue really embraced this challenge when they were thinking about the site. And so they actually entered their design and won in one of the first Salmon-Safe design competitions we launched in 2018. So you'll see that the site is a 10-story office building. It's mass timber construction. It's actually going to be the future home of Nature's Path. And for those of you that haven't heard of them, they're an organic food producer with a lot of aligning values with the Salmon-Safe program. And you'll see that the building itself is actually quite a striking biophilic design with a cell-like structure. And the lines of that cell are very interesting and serve a very cool purpose. So the stormwater is captured through the roof, and there is going to be an underground rainwater storage feature, which will reuse the water for toilet flushing. But also what's very interesting is the water will trickle down through the lines of that cell structure into some bioswales, which will be located at the bottom of the building, and to treat the rainwater and any other stormwater that will be flowing off the street. So that's a pretty neat feature of this building. The other neat feature is that the site aims to reintegrate historic drainage patterns of Calm Creek. So the False Creek Flats, for those of you that are familiar, have a number of buried creeks, and they were filled quite a long time ago during the industrial development of the area. And so this site really aims to reintegrate the historic drainage patterns, even though it can't daylight the creek. They're trying to do so above ground. And that the landscaping and plant selections will focus on species for habitat, pollinators, and biodiversity. So really hitting on that urban ecological function standard that we have in the urban development standards. So in the interest of time, I will stop there and pass it over to Kelsey, who will give us an overview of our agriculture program.
All right, thanks, Teresa. Let me just get my slides up. Oops. Started at the end. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit first about the Salmon-Safe agriculture program. And as Teresa mentioned a little while ago, it was previously run in BC by the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and Fraser Basin Council actually took over the agriculture program in 2018. So we've been running the agriculture program in BC for a couple years now. And also just to note that we use the same certification process and standards as the Salmon-Safe US team. So you'll see from this map that we have 32 certified sites currently in BC. So that's made up of 20 farms and 12 vineyards. And we have 3 sites currently in progress. So we're hoping that that number is going to be up to 35 shortly. And you'll notice from the map that this covers quite a few regions in BC. So we've got the Island, the Fraser Valley, the Sea to Sky region, and the Okanagan in our certified sites right now. So I just wanted to profile a couple of our Salmon-Safe agriculture champions. The first is Tantalus Vineyards, who are located in Kelowna, BC. And they've actually been a really vocal and enthusiastic champion. We've featured them in a little bit of our communications. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of the practices that they include on their site, which includes proactively dealing with erosion, some biodiversity initiatives, including bat houses, things like water infiltration, and connectivity to the surrounding area. Second champion that I wanted to highlight is Fraserland Organics, and they are located in Delta, BC, and they are made up of 3 family-run farms. And just a fun fact, I know David mentioned earlier the Ladybug brand, so they actually are a supplier to Ladybug down in the States. And yeah, some of their key practices include the erosion prevention and sediment control, water conservation, and protection of native biodiversity. So there's a lot of certification programs in the market right now, and a goal that we have for the next year or so is to have a better understanding of how Salmon-Safe certification aligns with these programs, which include the BC Wine Growers Association, Certified Organic, Environmental Farm Plan, and potentially others. So we really want to get a better understanding of how Salmon-Safe aligns with these programs in BC and how we can work in complementarity with these programs. Another goal we have for the next little while is to support our Salmon-Safe producers and work to connect Salmon-Safe products to consumers in the grocery store. So We have an emerging partnership right now with Choices Markets that we're working to hoping to build in the coming year, and really just working with grocery stores to promote Salmon-Safe certified products. And I also just wanted to quickly highlight some of our communications work. So you'll notice that in the left-hand side there, that's Tantalus. So we were featured in Port Canada magazine last year. We also have a webinar series. So our most recent webinar series was focused on urban development. And this upcoming year, we're going to be focusing more on the agricultural certification in our webinars. So we'll have a number of webinars focusing on the benefits of certification, as well as kind of getting into some case studies and kind of on the ground examples. So another thing that we wanted to talk about is, and it's important to focus for us going forward, is building relationships with First Nations communities and including these communities in the conversation of our systemic certification programs. So that's both for the urban programs as well as our agriculture programs. It's important to note that salmon are a keystone species across Cascadia, but they're particularly, they have particular cultural significance and value to First Nations across the region. So just wanted to highlight that. In the BC context, there are approximately, actually no, exactly 198 distinct First Nations in BC. And so the Canadian legal context, we have Section 35 of the Constitution recognizes Aboriginal rights, as well as the Canadian legal system, which has recognized inherent Aboriginal title. We also, in BC, last year signed Bill 41, which is the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in British Columbia. And so it's important to recognize and respect Indigenous unceded territories where we're working, but also, in addition to that, it's important to be engaging with and building relationships with local Indigenous communities. We see a real value in collaboration and partnership, as well as an opportunity to talk about integrating Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge to the Salmon-Safe process. And yeah, so we just wanted to just really highlight that First Nations are original stewards of the territory. They have deep knowledge and kind of the right to be stewards to those lands. So we really believe that building these relationships will lead to a richer process for Salmon-Safe certification. So some of the major things that we're looking to work on in the coming year or so is hoping to indigenize or talk about indigenizing the Salmon-Safe standards. And we're hoping to do this by first having the standards go through a First Nations referrals or consultation process. So we've been building a relationship with Tsleil-Waututh Nation in the Vancouver area, and we're hoping to continue this partnership and hopefully work with them on that. And the aim of this is to have a better understanding of where the opportunities are and what it might look like to talk about indigenizing the Salmon-Safe standards. Another thing that we are hoping to do in the next year or so is a pilot project. And obviously COVID-19 might have some implications on when we're able to do this, but we have had a developer come forward with a potential site project. And the idea would be to work with a local First Nation community in the Metro Vancouver area to actually go through and see what it would be like to have a First Nation part of the assessment process. And yeah, just kind of pilot that and see what it would, how it would work. Yeah, so that's all the time I have. I just wanted to quickly give a shout out to our sponsors. These are the funders of the Salmon-Safe BC program. They're really, without them, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we've been doing. And just finally, you can find more information on the Fraser Basin Council website, as well as our social media channels there, or contact Teresa or myself via email. So that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Kelsey, and thanks to Teresa. For our final panelist today to present an on-the-ground in-action case study, I'm pleased to introduce Wendy Avis of YVR, Vancouver International Airport. Wendy joined the Vancouver Airport Authority in June 2018 as Manager of Environment. She has worked in environmental sustainability for 20 years, mainly for various levels of government. including Environment and Climate Change Canada and the City of Vancouver. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. I feel like mine should be on the ground and in the air case study, maybe. So thanks, Teresa and Kelsey and David and Dan for an outline of sort of the Salmon-Safe program. I am going to give kind of a case study here of what it means as an airport. What has it meant for us to become Salmon-Safe certified? I can switch slides. Well, there we go. So a little bit about YVR. We are located on Sea Island in Richmond and at the mouth of the Fraser River, a very important salmon river. And we did start with a single runway in 1931, and we are now Canada's second busiest airport. And I would note that those earliest flights were actually the US mail flights, so we have had a long history of transborder cooperation. So our vision is to be a world-class sustainable hub airport. One of the things that is our strengths at YVR is that we are a community-based, not-for-profit organization, which means that all of our profits are reinvested back into the airport and into our local community, which means that we are improving YVR for everyone. We do lease 13.4 square kilometers or 5.2 square miles from the federal government, and we are responsible for balancing the needs for safe airport operations and wildlife management and environmental protection. So over the last decade, really the story at YVR has been one of growth. We are serving a growing community. The airport has been growing. In 2019, we hosted over 26.3 million passengers to reach destinations all around the world. So the airport itself is managed by about 550 airport authority staff, but we have about 26,000 people that actually work on Sea Island supporting the airport, with about $16.5 billion in annual economic output and 100,000 jobs across the province. So we are part of the community, and protecting our environment is really an important part of that. Kelsey talked about relationship with First Nations and with Indigenous peoples. For us, we have a Musqueam Indian Band YVR Airport Sustainability and Friendship Agreement, which we signed in June of 2017. So really an innovative, first of its kind 30-year agreement, which recognizes that we are located on Musqueam traditional territory, and it is our responsibility to work with Musqueam to achieve a sustainable and mutually beneficial future. So we have a commitment under that agreement to revenue sharing with the Musqueam First Nation, also employment and job training. So we have over 90 Musqueam community members who have been hired now to work at the airport. But also we partner around environmental improvements. And so the opportunity for us to learn from the Musqueam community, to learn about the land and the water, has been a tremendous one for us. So we do have a corporate environmental management plan, which is a 5-year time horizon. I'm really pleased that our newest plan just came out last month. It goes from the period 2020 to 2024. And the pillars under that plan are 4: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a commitment to achieve carbon neutrality in 2020 and work to net zero emissions by 2050. To reduce waste, so we have a waste diversion target of 60%, and reduce our potable water use by 50% per passenger. And then you can see here the cornerstone of our 4th target around improving ecosystem health is to maintain our Salmon-Safe certification. And so it really stitches together what we do around ecosystem health. So as Teresa said, we did become Salmon-Safe certified in 2016, just a squeak ahead of CTAC. And it really, for us, acknowledges our commitment to transform land and water management practices, so to protect the Fraser River quality and enhance salmon habitat. I am going to be brave as the last session today and try and share a video with you here. So I'm just going to switch over to YouTube here. If I can find it. Hang on 1 second. Give me 1 second, everyone. I just seem to have lost YouTube. Let's see if this works. Okay.
The airport's located in the Fraser River estuary. Essentially, we're right at the mouth of one of the major salmon rivers in BC, and we need to keep that front of mind to ensure that we're protecting it.
Salmon is a keystone species. When you protect a keystone species, you actually protect other species underneath it.
By taking a step to protect salmon, we're really protecting all the other aquatic and terrestrial species that support that ecosystem.
So Salmon-Safe is a certification program that the airport decided to enter and have some auditors come into our site, have a look at our facilities, and just make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the ecosystems.
So the heart of Salmon-Safe is about water quality.
Water quality ensures that we monitor everything that leaves this airport and into the river. So any water that is leaving roads, parking lots, aprons where aircraft operate, taxiways, runways, we monitor every outflow from YVR into the Fraser River.
Salmon-Safe is more than just a certificate of compliance. It's an integrated environmental management system that is going to apply to all aspects of the airport authority.
It's about protecting the environment and making sure we're all working together to achieve something that's amazing, because that's what we represent at YVR. We want to be world class, and this is all about being world class.
You know, we're just starting something big here at YVR. It's become a part of how we do business now. People are thinking and breathing Salmon-Safe and how we can protect the Fraser River and the region's water resources and its salmon for future generations.
So I hope that worked okay for everybody.
Inside, we have a barn owl that was...
Sorry, everyone, I didn't shut off my YouTube. There, okay. Just sharing my screen again. Okay. Sorry, you guys. My just wants to watch the video over and over and over again. Okay, sharing back into the presentation. There we go. Okay. So really what Salmon-Safe becoming certified enable us to do is to provide a framework for everything that we do around ecosystem health on Sea Island. And so you'll see in this list a reflective of the list that David and Kelsey and Teresa shared. So stormwater management, water use management. It's a way for us to connect the dots between our land use activity and our environmental outcomes. And so across, when people work on Sea Island, they know that we are Salmon-Safe. And so when they're working in these areas of water quality or pesticide reduction, they have this bigger picture of kind of why we're doing it. We did become Salmon-Safe in 2016. So some of the projects that we've worked on since then, so we have a water quality management plan that we updated, and we do have a world-class water quality testing and monitoring system where we test the water quality weekly and are out making sure that we understand what's in the ditches and making sure that the water is good quality. We have worked on water conservation. Both the picture on the lower left here is us working in the terminal with the tenants on water conservation. Also working on drought management, so invasive species that are around the island and managing those, and looking at planting drought-resistant plants. So all of those initiatives have been happening under the umbrella of Salmon-Safe. Couple of our key projects, so are in terms of green infrastructure. We have been implementing green infrastructure design into our projects. This one here is our long-term value parking lot with about 2,000 parking spaces, and you can see the bioswales here, and you can see that lovely Pacific Northwest rain coming down in the picture on the left, and you can see how well they are working. Our last project, which we're very excited about, will be our last of the 10 conditions that we have under our Salmon-Safe certification, as a habitat restoration project. So we have been working over the last couple of years with the Musqueam community to identify areas for potential habitat enhancement. And together we've chosen a site. So you can see it on the map here in the circled in yellow, what we call the Russ Baker land, sort of down beside the BCIT campus, for those of you who are familiar with this area. And we've been working with the Musqueam Fisheries Aquatic team over the last few years. They've been going in and removing invasives on this site and planting native species. But we are going to go in and do a big project next year to do the whole 600-meter length of the river there, and take out all the invasives, plant native species, and put a universally accessible multi-use pathway along that area for people to be able to walk along. So very excited about that project. And then lastly, one of the things that we do as well is our passengers coming through the airport. This is an example of a billboard that we have in the airport, showcasing that we are Salmon-Safe and that we are at the mouth of the Fraser River, and that passengers come in all shapes and sizes. So I'm going to stop there and just say thanks very much. There's my contact information for any questions. The yvr.ca/environment has more about our environmental management plan, and including the video that I just showed and a bunch of other videos if you're interested in that. And then the yvr.ca 2018 is our annual and sustainability report, and that has a whole chapter on ecosystem health and the activities that we're doing. So I hope that gave you a glimpse into what it's like for YVR to be Salmon-Safe. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'll pass it back over to Dan and to Teresa.
Great, thank you very much, Wendy. That's really an inspiring example of a Salmon-Safe site, really focused on continuous improvement. I am going to get back to my PowerPoint. So looking at my watch, I'm seeing that we're almost at happy hour, and knowing that most of our audience is at home, we wanted to invite all of you, as well as our panelists, for a virtual toast before we start our Q&A. So while all of you out there in our audience look for your beverage of choice, ideally it would be Salmon-Safe beer or wine, of course. But I wanted to close this session with an image of the most recent farm to achieve Salmon-Safe certification just before the pandemic, 6 weeks ago or so. This is a grain grower in the Palouse watershed of Eastern Washington, just north of Pullman, Washington, transitioning to certified barley for malt on land owned by Washington State University. As you've heard today, one of Salmon-Safe's goals is to generate market connections that really help inspire water quality protection and habitat conservation at the landscape scale, from the Salish Sea to the interior Columbia Basin and beyond across Salmon Nation. So that malt that comes off those rolling hills of the Palouse is then, it goes to craft malters and then to brewers, and is turned into beer, like this beer that just launched a couple of weeks ago. This is the new Upstream IPA from Portland's Hopworks, featuring certified hops from the Yakima Valley and malt from Walla Walla. So Hopefully everyone has their beverage ready. I can't see any of you. I can only see myself at this point. But I have my Upstream IPA. Just got a little splash of beer on my computer monitor. All right, cheers.
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 So thank you for that toast. To wrap things up, I wanted to say also thanks again to our panelists, Stewardship Partners, Fraser Basin Council, and YVR, and invite you all to join this Salmon-Safe movement across the Salish Sea. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Teresa for our Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. So I'd like to open up the Q&A portion of our session in the remaining time that we have together. And thank you to all of those who have entered your questions and comments into the Q&A box. And I'm just going to take a gander at what you have entered here and read out the questions in the order they've been received, and then forward those questions to either a panelist that you have indicated, or I will self-select a panelist to answer the questions that we have. So to start us off, we have a question from Ben Shanafelt, and this is for Dan. With respect to the Vulcan projects, are there more sustainable practices in place for the actual construction of buildings in addition to the actual finished project?
Yeah, that's a great question with respect to what Salmon-Safe means in terms of these projects. It's really three-part, essentially. Design, we're looking at the design of the project in terms of on-site stormwater management, water quantity treatment, water quality treatment. We're looking at design in terms of site and maintaining any ecologically sensitive areas on the site, in terms of designing the site with native landscaping and maximizing environmental function of the site. And then we're looking at the construction phase in terms of pollution prevention. And we see oftentimes even very innovative projects still have runoff during the construction phase. And that's a time when a significant part of a project's environmental impact actually happens. So we're looking at pollution prevention practices during construction. Salmon-Safe standard is 0 sediment runoff during construction, which is beyond code, beyond compliance. And that's one point to make, I think, is really everything we're talking about today is beyond compliance. You know, this is not, Salmon-Safe is not enforcing a regulatory standard. We're looking for innovative landowners and project managers and developers to go beyond in terms of that. And then the third element I wanted to mention is operation of sites. So we've gone through design, construction, then we're looking at ongoing operation. And again, it's Salmon-Safe is not a point-in-time certification. We're verifying performance over time. We're monitoring water use in terms of conservation of water. We're monitoring integrated pest management and reduced inputs. We're monitoring restoration over time, recognizing that those efforts are long-term. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. So the next question, Dan, maybe you can also touch on this one. For Salmon-Safe certifications, is there a standard set of qualifications for every development meets, or do the standards for certification depend on a specific site that's being developed? For example, I imagine a development on the Puget Sound shoreline on the Puget Sound shoreline would require a lot more to be salmon-safe than the development further inland. And this question comes from Michael Bailey. And I think you've touched a bit on this in your presentation, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Another great question. And I think actually, Teresa, you touched on this a bit too. In terms of our urban standards, we have standards that only apply for projects that have shoreline habitat or some kind of aquatic interface. And many of our projects are upland sites, and in some ways those are able to qualify for Salmon-Safe more of a fast track because we're not looking at stream habitat conservation. We're not looking at wetland management. You know, highly urban sites, we really focus in on stormwater management primarily. But the important thing to note here is that Salmon-Safe is not simply a checklist that's applied everywhere. It is an expert system. It is based on a multidisciplinary science team in the field at the site, determining what's feasible in terms of conservation, looking at history of site, and then we're applying Salmon-Safe standards and looking for the developer or the landowner to take on as much as feasible in terms of reducing watershed impact or having a positive impact in the watershed.
Great, thanks, Dan. The next question is for David or Dan from Dana Wu, and she says, in addition to Vulcan and big money names, in what ways are y'all outreaching to farms and businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and or immigrants/refugees, otherwise that otherwise do not speak English? As I know, we also depend on many migrant farm workers in Skagit and Eastern Washington. Many thanks in advance.
David, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And while we don't do specific outreach to those communities, a lot of those communities are our partners, and we offer the Salmon-Safe certification in different ways for them to get involved. A good example is our work with the Snoqualmie tribe, one of our partners in the Snoqualmie watershed that we work with on restoration work. We recently worked with them to certify their small produce farm that's located at their casino to recognize them for those practices. Also working with the Squaxin Island tribe and certifying their garden down on at their location down in Shelton. We also worked with, and we have worked with Viva Farms, which is located in the Skagit watershed, Skagit County, and they're a farm incubator outfit, and they do a lot of bilingual training for new farmers, future farmers, working with people of color, Latino groups. And so I think it's an area that we could definitely do more with, and it really comes down to partnerships and getting additional partners so that we can achieve and bring that certification to those communities.
Great, thanks, David.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Add, Teresa, one other element maybe to mention is that increasingly we're focused on affordable housing in our development work too, as a primary sector in terms of our outreach. And to date, we've worked with partners like Habitat for Humanity and Catholic Charities and other providers of affordable housing, really looking to develop a toolkit for those kinds of projects.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And I also wanted to acknowledge that Dana did also pose that question to Kelsey and myself, so I'll chime in a little bit. And Dana, admittedly, having the agriculture program transition to Fraser Basin Council in late 2018, we're still a new kid on the block with this program, so to speak. And so we've been working with Pacific Salmon Foundation to really dive deep into some of the existing partnerships that they created in the years that they were working on the project. And trying to transition those to Fraser Basin Council. And a lot of the work that we have to do this year is really to outline, who's been engaged and where are the gaps. And certainly we've done that with the urban program and looking at the gaps just in our standards in terms of recognizing inherent rights of Indigenous nations in BC. So that's one gap we want to work on, but we still have a lot of work to do in identifying those gaps in the agriculture program. And you raise a really good question. I think there has been some work done by PSF, especially with the outreach to those family-owned farms that Kelsey outlined in the Fraserland example. But we still have a lot of work to do, and a lot of organizations that we know are working on Vancouver on this issue. We need to connect with them and get some guidance on how we may do this right. Kelsey, was there anything that you wanted to add to that question?
No, I don't think so. I think everyone kind of touched on it. Like, I think the key thing here is continuing to build partnerships and continuing to kind of do that outreach and be conscious of equity and justice and stuff like that when we're thinking about our outreach.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. So we have another question from Michael Bailey, and this one is, are there tiers to how salmon-safe a development is? I think it's important to distinguish whether a partnering development improves the ecosystem made it more salmon safe than before development, or is meeting minimum requirements to get a certification and perhaps negatively impacting the ecosystem they developed while receiving the salmon safe label. I'm glad that these certifications are available, and I think we do need to offer these labels to bring partners to the table, but I'm curious about the details. Thanks. So I think, Dan, this might be something you can touch on, just also in light of the fact that we're also reviewing the standards, and maybe you could expand a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. And again, a good question. Salmon safe, we looked at potentially having levels of salmon safe certification early on, but we really thought about, if the brand is salmon safe, then a site is either salmon safe or it's not. So salmon safe standards going all the way back to the very beginning of the program were modeled on actually Forest Stewardship Council standards, FSC standards, which are a list of required conditions, and there are preconditions. So with salmon safe, there are prerequisites that need to be met in terms of preconditions, things that must be in place for certification to happen. So a development needs to take certain actions in terms of, for example, it can't be impacting stream habitat, to even begin the salmon safe process. But after that, we will conditionally certify a project. So then based on checking in on performance in terms of meeting those conditions, then the site is moving down the continuum towards being fully salmon safe certified. Virtually all of our urban projects to date, many projects are all conditionally certified. But again, they do have to meet those prerequisites in advance. And we have projects that don't achieve certification, and that happens relatively frequently.
Thanks, Dan. And just a note, just looking at time, we do have, it says 16 questions, although I know some of them are not questions. And I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of comments around the YouTube video links. So maybe I'll just encourage David and Wendy to provide those links to Caleb or to the broader chat out to attendees, because folks would like to see them and access them online. There is a question from Daryl Martin around any Canadian members in Salmon-Safe. And I guess I'm going to take a stab at it, but I'm not sure I understand the question entirely, so I'll try. So Salmon-Safe BC is still very focused on British Columbia. And in terms of our progress with, we have a number of different partners that we work with, but the ones that we work closely with obviously are the sites in progress, as well as the certified sites that you saw listed both on Kelsey's map for agriculture and then the urban map that I had put up. But in terms of anything outside of the BC scope, although we've been asked to expand and potentially consider Salmon Safe Canada, it isn't something that we have the capacity for at this time. Although we do get a lot of inquiries from other provinces of how Salmon Safe US and BC works, and they're very interested in partnering and learning more and seeing how that could be applied to other parts of the Canadian context. Dan, I don't know if you had any other comments in that regard, but that's my best guess on what that question means.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. I think you covered it.
Okay, great. All right, I have a question here from Diane Sanford asking, what are softer chemistries? And maybe I'll throw this one to David for some thoughts.
I don't know that I can answer that. I'd punt that over to Dan.
Okay.
I'll just note, the context, I think this came from possibly one of my slides, and I think it's in referring to the pesticide, integrated pest management aspects of some of the farm sites.
Okay, I can touch on that. I mean, working with some of the vineyards in Eastern Washington, what they're doing is they're planting a mustard in between the rows of vineyards so that the leaf cutter insect will eat the mustard and not eat the new shoots that are coming out from the vines. So it's a way to utilize nature and control the impacts on your crop production as opposed to using chemicals and just killing them. And so there's more of that to be done. And Salmon-Safe works closely with the Washington State University and other universities across the region.
Thanks, David. So the next question is from Ben Shanafelt. And he also has a question for myself and Kelsey. With the increase in residential development in areas such as Squamish and other growing communities, is it feasible to have salmon-safe partnerships with some of these more expansive development groups, or are these already in place? Thank you. I'll take a stab at that, and the answer is absolutely yes. So one of the areas that this has come up is actually one of the webinars we delivered on urban development, and we had a couple folks from Squamish chiming in, which was really cool. And they had put in a couple of queries for sites that were up and coming in that neighborhood, and to see if we would want to look at potentially doing a salmon-safe process for those. And of course we would. Anywhere in BC, we can engage. And so it's really a matter of just getting in touch with us, and then we can start that conversation about what the site looks like and seeing if they're eligible. So absolutely, yes. We would love to go to Squamish. Okay, the next question is from Amy Greenwood, and Amy Greenwood does say hi. She used to work for the Salmon-Safe BC program, so she says hi to all the panelists. Her question is, are the certified urban sites required to provide data to demonstrate improvements in water quality discharged from the site over time? Maybe Wendy Avis will speak to this later. So we did hear a few points from Wendy in terms of water quality. I don't know if there's anything further, Dan, that you would like to add in terms of requirements in the annual review.
Well, with respect to water quality impacts, certain very high impact sites, Salmon-Safe will require stream monitoring. For example, golf courses would be an example where we're looking for monitoring, or another example would be an airport situation. But for the most part, Salmon-Safe, in terms of documenting continuous improvement over time, we're focused more on water conservation and continuation of those water quality protection measures and enhancement of those measures over time, more than quantification of impact. Wendy, I don't know if there's more you would add in terms of the reporting you're doing for us.
No, I think that covers it. I mean, we do provide information from our water quality monitoring and measuring, and also water conservation as part of our report. So that is part of showing and demonstrating that we are monitoring the water quality and that we are making sure that it's okay.
Yeah, and thanks to Amy for that question. Amy being a originator of this program in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm. Great to hear from you, Amy. So I'm looking at the time, and to be respectful and be able to end right at 4, I'm acknowledging that there are 9 questions left. I really heartfully thank you guys for your questions and interest. So how I think we'll go forward with this is if Leanne, Jack, Jane, Amy, Sarah, Bob, and Deborah could please enter their emails into the Q&A box, if you wouldn't mind. That way, the panelists, we can gather these questions and answer you. But we would have to do it by email just to be respectful of ending right at 4. And also maybe we can liaise with our Western Washington University folks to, if we miss any of those emails, maybe to cross-reference their list, just to make sure that we don't miss you. But thank you so much for those questions. And as we're getting those emails in the Q&A box now, I'll pass it over back to Dan to give us some closing words.
Yeah, I didn't have any closing remarks prepared necessarily beyond thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your interest. Again, you were looking to build this movement on the Salish Sea. So we really welcome other organizations, other NGOs to join us in the way that Fraser Basin Council and Stewardship Partners have joined us. Scientists in the audience, we welcome input regarding salmon-safe standards. Our urban standards are under a major update this year. It's a great time to weigh in on that. We would encourage all of you to follow Salmon-Safe BC, Stewardship Partners, and/or Salmon-Safe on social media, Facebook, and so on, and look for the Salmon-Safe label. Cheers, and thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.